We are live.
Senate appropriations have these back to the FY27 budget. We're having a question for the Secretary of State's office. So come on up and join, Lauren.
Thank you so much.
We'll let you introduce yourself. And we have a question on section C105, which is on page 21 of the House budget, about the Secretary's interest in creating state service fund, or maybe that is already created. I guess that's the change that the Secretary is looking for, is that the full money at the end of each year stay within the fund in the Secretary's office, and that you just do a report each year of it.
That is correct. For the record, my name is Lauren Hibbert. I'm the Deputy Secretary of State. I apologize that you only have me here today. The Secretary had a conflict, so if there's additional questions or things that you want to talk to her about, let me know, but I'm happy to answer any questions. So the Secretary of State has two funds. One is his Secretary of State Service Fund, which this language in front of you affects. The other is the OPR fund. This language does not affect the OPR fund. And we entered into the session wanting to create a capital fund, an IT capital fund. And that's because we just have been through an experience where we have built 4 new systems and an additional 5 systems, but 4 major systems, and IT systems. And IT systems are expensive. They go over multiple years, and they are completely necessary. I really like to think of IT as our front door. The majority of the people that we serve, the Vermonters we serve, use our IT system. The majority of business filings in our state happen on Sunday afternoons. So people are thinking, I'm going to start a new business on Sunday afternoons. Correlation or causation, we don't know. Just that for the science teachers.
We need more Sunday afternoons here.
So, you know, Vermonters come and receive our services through our IT systems. That is how we provide the majority of our service to Vermonters, and that is how we're able to do so with such a small team of individuals as well. Just for OPR, we license over 3,000 individuals and entities. We have 9 people responsible for licensing those folks. That's a lot of people that otherwise we would not be able to do if we did not have the IT system. So we were able to build those 5 systems because we had some money, principally in the election space, because we had federal funds under HAVA. And those grants had been accruing interest. So we had interest money saved year after year because we knew we were going to replace these systems. And the previous administration knew that we were going to replace these systems. So we were able to replace those systems based on that money. But the federal money is really not secure at this time. And it will take many, many years before we have interest that would be suitable to support an IT build. We know that the OPR system is going to need either a refresh of the current system or a new system. We're budgeting that will be anywhere between $5 and $12 million over the course of a couple of years. Our office has never come to the legislature to ask for an IT allocation for a bill. And we really we ask for and then we're given very few general funds. So the idea for us coming into the session was we'd like to create a 3rd fund under the Secretary of State called an IT capital fund. And we thought that that would be helpful for when we're doing long-term investment planning. We then talked to the Joint Fiscal Office, and they really asked us not to create another fund.
Yeah.
And we're
asking them to do a report on special funds, so they're trying to lower the number of the report on.
And I understand that. So the way the language currently works for the Secretary of State Special Fund is that excess funds revert into the general fund. And we have been steady in contributing back to the general fund over the course of years. In recent years, in part because of these IT spends, we have not contributed back into the general fund. What we're asking for is that there's a conversation in the fall with the Joint Fiscal Committee about the status of the Secretary of State fund, how much excess revenue we have and the plans that we have for that revenue, and that be a conversation as opposed to an automatic reversion of monies. Not that we will not contribute to the general fund. I think that will be part of the conversation in the fall, but that it's a conversation that we have more openly and publicly about what the purpose of that money is and where it should go.
Okay.
Because the alternative is we're giving it to the general fund and then we're the general fund. So it seems easier to keep the money and have a conversation about how much should go to the general fund.
Yeah, I mean, from the budgeting perspective, it's, we have all the money that we can spend as a high priority, but we can see from your perspective, it's easier. Questions there was?
I do not.
It's a general, general.
I have some questions. So, can you tell me, I'm looking at the language that's here on page 22. And you have, that will not contain OPR. Nothing like that.
So it's on 111.
Yeah, that's what.
Then this page is 21. It's on the Grady red line. On this thing, it's 111.
So going to page 22, where it says which funds that will not be included, the OPR funds, but then it's funds collected pursuant to 117. I just want to know.
That is the vital records.
Oh, but,
Those go to the department.
and then you also have authority to collect deposit into the fund of optional services offered in the course of normal business, and one of those is, I'm just curious, your periodic sales of data.
Yeah.
A subscription. So I always ask the question about the security of that kind of data. What kind of data is it?
Sure.
It's a different question from what we're saying in the fund. And I have other questions.
Okay. So to the data question, we are in the process of developing that policy. We received that authorization last legislative session. That is something that I'm essentially working on. A policy where we can sell data to organizations, some of which we already provide data to. So for instance, the UVM Health Network receives a daily download of all of our licensees that we have in their regulated professions that work in the hospital. They do a daily check of who's on the floor and is that person licensed, because it creates problems for them if they have someone whose license was revoked yesterday and who's working today, because then they don't receive Medicaid, Medicare funds. That money is withheld by the federal government. So a lot of who we are providing data to is for compliance. It's with sister state agencies. It's for the board of National Board of Nurses. It's in the OPR space.
Understood.
In the business services space, there's lots and lots of people who want to have the data that is all publicly available now. There's not any data that we have that's not publicly available in the business services space, which is in stark contrast to the professional regulation space, where there's lots of data that is not public. They want to be able to obtain that data faster and easier than doing a manual ping of our systems. And it's in our interest to provide that to them through an API, an automatic processing of information. Because right now they're created bots that do that automatic function on our business services system and actually really clog up our system because they're doing so many draws of our system through an automatic. They're automatically built bots.
And you're currently developing the security protocols.
Yes, we're currently developing the security protocols and how much it should cost. What is the volume? What's the frequency, the volume, and what our securities require around it.
Did you get requests from others? Sorry, your question, but it's similar to from like data brokers that just want like, I want to know the addresses of all of the businesses registered in Vermont, or maybe a classification or something like that.
I think it's different if it's a whole business versus an office.
Yes, yes, I understand. Data brokers are using our system now to obtain that information. Whether or not we would allow them to purchase like a subscription model, I'm not sure.
They can just download it now.
They can download it now. And we encourage for anybody listening and any of your constituents, if you have a home business, we recommend getting a post office box. Yeah, you all do.
Right.
I recommend that to you too.
Yeah, but as far as just the data,
Yeah.
that's not so bad.
So I'm looking at the last paragraph on page 22, where you're reporting annually to joint fiscal. You indicated that this would be a way of defining, I would think, what's reverted, what's not, but also budget formulation. But there's nothing in here that says that. It just says you're giving us an update, including projected revenues and expenditures from the fund.
Yeah,
But nothing about any oversight to how
yeah.
the money's used.
So in full transparency, this is recommended language from the Joint Fiscal Office that we asked for. And it's my understanding is it's based on DFR's language, which is very similar. DFR's excess revenue does not automatically revert either. It goes through this process.
How much money are we talking about in this?
This year, we're looking at maybe $2.5 million, but our revenue is very up and down. It's all dependent on business filing fees. And that really ebbs and flows, which is another piece of our budgeting problem.
And that's what we were, when you were had a direct app review, when the office had a direct app, was it around that amount, $2 to $4 million? You didn't remember it?
I think it's never been over $4 million. I think it's been anywhere from 1 to 4. I don't think it definitely has been less than 2.
And you had mentioned the Joint Fiscal Committee, this says like a report. And then I guess at that point, there could be, it doesn't talk about discussion, but at that time, when you issue the report, the Joint Fiscal Committee could recommend. It seems like you have money that can.
Yeah.
So do you know, you should report annually, okay, at the September, okay.
And I wouldn't assume that would mean that would not be a part of the ongoing conversation throughout the legislative session either.
Right.
It's not a one-time conversation. It's just so that we can start to say, if we need to spend $6 million in 2 years on a system, that we can start to build that money in our special fund and start having a conversation about why that's the need and why that's our plan.
Right. I think Nora said a question.
It was asked and answered.
Okay,
I'm morning about it.
Senator Weston.
Well, we've had a number of systems at tax department, for example. But I wouldn't expect any money from the tax department. We wouldn't want to run through the budget process. This really does go out around the budget process.
It's not intended to go out around the budget process. It's, I think taxes money is always general fund money, and ours is always special fund money with a process for it to go back into the general fund. So we're not trying to go outside of the general fund allocation spending model. What we're trying to do is plan within our special fund and then contribute to the general fund as is appropriate, as we can jointly plan to do. But I hear the concern. I'm not trying to evade the concern. I think we're in a different budget process than tax, because my understanding of tax budget, and you guys are a much better expert than me, is that all of the revenue that they obtain goes directly into the general fund versus all of the money goes into our special fund. And that was the design of our budget a long time ago.
Senator Lyons was no.
So just one other question. You mentioned that this would be important so that you could develop your IT. And so, but there's nothing here that really defines how the money was used. So you told me, is it for capital expenditures and IT, or how are you defining?
Well, I use IT as the example because it's the one that's most readily accessible in my mind. You know, we are sending out a voter guide that we did not ask for a general fund allocation because we had enough excess revenue to absorb that cost without asking for a general fund allocation. So that is an example of a much smaller expense than an IT system, but that is something else that we would use the monies for. We will need to do some investments in Vasara. We've had to do some structural investments with Vasara security around our documents, but we will need to do an IT investment within Vasara as well. So that would be a space that we would use this money. If we were to continue to not receive federal funds in the way that we have in the past, then ballot printing would be used. This money would be used for. And so that's the type of work that we want to be able to use the special fund money for. And that's how the programs under the Secretary of State, principally elections and Vasara and Safe at Home, have always been intended to be supported by business revenue. None of those programs receive general fund allocation.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So, excuse my ignorance in this, but when you develop an IT system, how is your process different than other agencies and departments in state government? And do you have to go through digital services in the same way?
We do, yeah. We follow the same procurement requirements, both by BGS and ADS. And actually I've had a lot of success with both of those partners. You know, if there's a contract that's over $1 million, then we have an ADS member embedded in the project. And we've done two of those, 2 out of the 5 were over $1 million. And needed that partnership. And all of our IT contracts are reviewed by ADS and go through the PAT process and all of those things. I think that's a really important part of building sustainable and sufficient systems.
Okay. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. And if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I look forward to watching your discussion on it.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think we have any more discussion on that right now.
For a couple of years.
Oh, you-
Drive that.
well,
That we rushed.
Sure.
So in 2023, 1.23 million, and in 2022, 2.87.
Last couple. Just what you said,
Yeah.
range. Yeah.
Great. I like to be right as much as possible.
So we are waiting for Emily. So we will take a break